Shalom and welcome. This is Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel, a project of the International Department of the Temple Institutes. Today, the 27th day of the month of Tammuz, 5775, July 14th, 2015. Rabbi Chaim Richman here together with Yitzhak Ruvain. This Shabbat is the conclusion of the book of Numbers, two Torah portions, the penultimate and the ultimate, Parshiot Masai and Matot. And may I mention
Matot Masay,
Matot Masay, and may I mention as well that Thursday night will usher in the new moon, Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the new month of what is actually officially called Menachem Av, the consoling Father. The month of Av, which of course features the fast day of the 9th of Av, the day upon which the Holy Temple was destroyed. So as we come into this week there's a lot of changes going on. We're passing from the book of Numbers into the book of Deuteronomy. It's a completely different energy. We're passing from the month of Tammuz into the month of Av, which is also a ratcheting up, the notch of the level of the intensity of the mourning and the feeling of loss of the Holy Temple. When the month of Av enters, the people of Israel exhibit a marked change in their activities, in their customs. We all become much more like mourners as we crescendo with the fast day of the 9th day of Av. And the world is in a state of tremendous agitation, our world at least. The suspense, the tension in the air is palpable because of the deal that's now been announced between Obama, President of the United States of America, and his Western allies, and the demonic regime of Iran. They've reached their deal. They've reached their nuclear pact. And we don't know completely yet what the details of that deal are. There are conflicting reports from the two sides about what they are, but we do know that as far as Israel is concerned, it's a very bad deal. It's very, very dangerous. It brings us to the brink of a terribly new situation. Obama, as far as he's concerned, it's like, whoa, we've now prevented a world war. Everything is going to be wonderful. But Iran, may we remind you, is the world's leading sponsor of state-sponsored terrorism. We know for a fact that Iran, through its proxies, foments insurgency and militancy and Islamic fundamentalist terror in this region and all over the world. Iran doesn't hide its contempt and disgust and hatred for the West, for America, and Iran has never hid and is constantly repeating its intention to destroy Israel. So it's pretty amazing to us, when we always talk about the confluence of time and the Torah readings and God's sacred calendar. It is absolutely, almost unspeakably, exquisitely amazing to us that this deal, which may at least bespeak difficulty for Israel, anticipated difficulty, that it was concluded with the collusion of the West during this period of national tragedy and mourning for the people of Israel, the national mourning for our lack of the Holy Temple. So, on the one hand, the world is reeling from that announcement and wondering whither we go from here. And on the other hand, there are two tracks, to life, yin and yang, or as Ecclesiastes says, God created this opposite that. There are two different forces in the world. So some of the world is also reeling still from the announcement that the Temple Institute just made. We made a very, very important announcement this week, and that announcement was perfect for everything that the Temple Institute represents, teaches, stands for. What the Institute stands for is the fulfillment of Exodus 25:8, God commands us to build for him a sanctuary. We do not believe that the Holy Temple is a thing of the past. We do not believe that it is ancient history. We do not believe it is mythological, that it will come down from heaven, or that it is a thing of the past, or that the Messiah is supposed to build it. We believe Israel is commanded to rebuild the Holy Temple. That is our goal. Why? Because that is the positive commandment that God entrusted us with, just like he entrusted us with the fulfillment of the rest of his word. It happens to be also, as every prophet tells us, the secret to the rectification of the relationship between God and man. It is the secret of the hope and dignity for all humanity. It's a secret of world peace, and that is our goal. And the announcement that we made is that we are now embarking upon the most important project, probably I could say, that we've ever done. Absolutely amazing, absolutely earth-shattering, and that is that we are beginning to raise a herd of red cows here in Israel, and from that herd we will be able to select a perfect red heifer in order to fulfill the commandment of Numbers 19, which in itself means that we will be able to restore the state of known as tahara in Hebrew, which is biblical purity, which is the last obstacle to the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. And that means that in these days of mourning for the Holy Temple, wondering when the cycle of mourning will stop, wondering when, as it were, God will favor his people with the rebuilding of the temple, well, that's not automatic. Wondering how long we will be as mourners for a relative. And in these very same days when the existence of Israel once again is challenged to the point of malignant forces that are teaming up against us for what would appear to be plans for the destruction of Israel, while the world is teetering on the brink of what could really be nuclear holocaust if the West, that's a really smart move, has decided to empower Iran to proceed with their plans, which is basically, please don't argue with me, just read what it's really all about. That's really what it comes down to. That's really what it's going to come down to. Instead of taking away their nuclear ambitions, it's like giving it a stamp and saying, okay, your nuclear ambitions are kosher. That's what Obama has done, right? So the world is maybe wondering, or maybe not even wondering, what's going to happen here because this announcement is the precursor of nuclear destruction. Our announcement is the polar opposite. Our announcement is we are busying ourselves here in Jerusalem and in the land of Israel with the secret of the restoration of biblical purity, the secret of the spiritual balance that will enable the indwelling of the Shekhinah, the divine presence on earth, that will enable the rebuilding of the temple. So talk about your diametric opposition, talk about your polar opposites, talk about your divine timing, that in the very week when the children of Israel are poised to enter into the land of Israel, as the passage between the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy, and the very days that we are intensifying our level of mourning over the loss of the Holy Temple and crying the desecration of God's honor, as we move from the month of Tammuz to the month of Av, and as the West basically drives nails into the coffin of whatever hope could be of a normal world, throwing Israel under the bus and somehow just deciding that the mullahs of Tehran can be trusted. At the same time, the Temple Institute is beginning to raise a kosher red heifer. We made this announcement and people were astounded. Many people were very moved, and some people are like, oh, that's the announcement? We thought you were like going to tell us that you're starting the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. That's all? It's just about a cow? Actually, if I may educate you on the nuances of biblical law, and after all, if you don't mind, it is the Word of God, and we never received a cancellation order, and we do believe in the God of Israel and what he tells us, and we don't need anyone else to tell us what it is that he told us or what it is that he meant. The fact is that this project is huge. It's bigger than life. It's staggering. And one of the main reasons for that is just simply the whole understanding of what it is that we're doing. You know, the news throughout the world periodically of this, I'll call it a sighting, like a UFO sighting, of the birth of a red heifer, whether it's in some rural backwater in North America or somewhere in one of the far corners of the earth, people get very excited about the birth of the red heifer because they know it has something to do with redemption. They know it has something to do with the rebuilding of the temple. It's considered to be some sort of messianic portent, and they get very excited about it. But you know what? It's not practical. It's not practical because the place of the red heifer is here in the land of Israel. And also, you know how we don't believe that the temple is going to come down from heaven? You know how we don't believe that the temple is mythological or something mystical, but it's actually a structure that we are commanded to build because God makes us partners in his plan? So too, here's the main thing that you need to hear. This is a very massive difference in thinking. Why? You know what? If God commanded us to do something, if he expects action from us, if we are entrusted with the fulfillment of his word, why wait for some sort of sign or wonder or bell to go off or miracle? A cow is not a miracle. A cow is a cow, and God commands us to do this. It says in Numbers 9:10, "Speak to the children of Israel, and that they take for you a red heifer," God said to Moses. And so the idea is that rather than wait for something to happen, we don't believe it's mystical. After almost 3 full decades of very intensive research and study, and believe me, there is a tremendous amount that has to be studied, and don't undermine or underestimate how deep the Word of God is, we have successfully begun here in Israel to raise this herd of red cows. I say red cows and not red heifers because a lot of cows are red, and that's the whole point. Red cows could be found all over the world, and you can find out about that in the video that we're going to point you to in a few minutes. But a kosher red heifer means a red cow of a very particular color and a very particular age, without any one of a very vast number of physical blemishes, that has never been used for work, and that has been protected and raised in a very specific and controlled environment from birth. And that cow could be used as a kosher red heifer. And so we have partnered with an Israeli cattleman, and we are actually going to be producing this herd through a program of the implantation of frozen embryos of red Angus cattle from the United States of America into Israeli domestic cattle. And this program, with the approval of the Ministry of Agriculture and other government agencies, has already succeeded. On this particular farm where we are working with these men, it's already succeeded in that they've already given birth to a number of male red Anguses, and now we are expanding the program, and we are looking forward to the birth of the female cows as well. And we have a wonderful agreement with this rancher that we are going to be able to separate as many cows as we need to isolate the proper candidates and take care of them in the proper way. It's a very massive, sprawling, expensive, ambitious undertaking. We appreciate your spiritual identification with this project and your support of this project, because this is about you. It's about bringing purity to the world, bringing the Holy Temple to the world, bringing the presence of God into the world, ushering in the redemption of all mankind. It's pretty serious. It's pretty serious. And this is the antidote to every madness that's going on in the world today. And it's so bold, and it's so completely different than just sitting and waiting and hearing, oh, a red heifer was born in Moldova. Or, for example, a red heifer was born in New Jersey a couple months ago. It made headlines in the Jewish world because it was born in a town called Lakewood, New Jersey, where there is a very famous rabbinical seminary and a very important school of Torah, yeshiva, in this town. So it got noticed because it was born to a Jewish rancher in a small New Jersey town, and rabbis came and identified it and said, yes, this could be a red heifer. And it was tremendously exciting, and the guy was very excited. And he said somebody offered him $1 million for it. I don't know who that was, by the way, because that would only have been me. But I didn't do it, so I don't know what he's talking about. But he said he didn't take him up on it because, no, it's too important to him to have a red heifer. And lo and behold, just this week, in fact, just a couple of days before we were ready to make our announcement to the world that we have begun this program, which we have been keeping very, very quiet until it was really ready to launch, we read in the news. What do we read in the news? That heifer in New Jersey became disqualified. Why did it become disqualified? because his color started to change, which, by the way, happens very often in the animal world, that their color red starts to turn white at a certain age. No, that's not why it became disqualified. It became disqualified because it gave birth to a calf. And that is a disqualification in the Torah. So wait, you mean to say that this rancher that was so excited that turned down $1 million for this heifer didn't know, wasn't instructed by the rabbis who made a video, who came to visit him, didn't know that he was supposed to isolate it and not let a male onto her and not give birth? Apparently he didn't even know the most basic thing about how to take care of a red heifer, and that is the whole point of this program. Nothing is being left to chance. We are specifically, on purpose, from the get-go, raising these cows for the purpose of being a red heifer under very controlled and strict supervision, and with the participation and supervision of these great leading rabbis who know exactly how this should be done. It is a massive upheaval in Jewish thought, and its time has come. Its time has come, and I hope that you listeners will appreciate what it is that we're saying, that we're trying to do here. We're trying basically to make a difference to the world in God's eyes. Yes, the future is in God's hands. The future is up to God. But you know what? There's a little fine print, and the fine print is that God commands us to fulfill His word. He allows us to be part of the saga, and in a way, in a very strong way, the future is actually in our hands because He wants us to act. And so this is actually, if you appreciate what the red heifer is all about, you'll understand that this is much, much closer than we have ever been before to the actual building of the Holy Temple.
And if you appreciate what the red heifer is all about, but you'd like to learn more, you can go to our Indiegogo fundraising campaign in order to support this effort, in which there is a video which the rabbi speaks very, very directly and succinctly as to the program, as to the importance of the program, and there is a lengthier text explanation which discusses all the fine points of how this is happening, what the significance is, and also there's some myth-busting points in it as well. Well, we thought that it was supposed to be like this, we always heard this, and the rabbi points out what really is fact and what's fiction. You know what? Someday, God willing, your children or grandchildren will ask you, well, when America and the West signed this nuclear deal with Iran, and when they ask that question, they'll have known what transpired as a result of that. They'll say, "What did you do? What did you do that day? What did you do?" And you know what? If you go to the Temple Institute's website or our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, or go directly to our Indiegogo fundraising page, which is entitled Raise a Red Heifer in Israel, you can say to your children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren, on that day, I put my support into the Temple Institute's effort to raise a pure heifer, a pure red heifer in Israel, and you know what? That's made all the difference. That is what you can do. You know what? You can also get a sign and you can protest, and you can do lots of things, and you can write letters to the editor, but this is something that you can do that will support what will be a real change in the way things are, a real change in the status quo in this world.
And this is like a development of nuclear proportions. It really is. It is a completely different set of variables that will change creation. And it is the absolute polar, diametric opposite of a pact that's being signed as we speak, which is hell-bent on basically destruction, because it is recognition and legitimization of an evil regime to continue their program of destruction. And this is about reining humanity in and bringing all mankind to a greater level of peace and harmony and unity. If you believe in the Word of God, at least, that's what we're told. That's what the history of the Holy Temple is. That's what the prophecies are all about. People are asking all kinds of questions. Who told you that you're allowed to use genetics? Who told you you're allowed to use embryo implantation in the wombs of Israeli domestic cattle and bring about a red heifer? Where are you getting all this information? Well, you could trust us in this very specifically Jewish project that the Jewish people here in the land of Israel have been thoroughly investigating this Jewish topic with Jewish rabbis for many, many years, and have been reaching working conclusions according to the science and technology and understanding and advancements of our generation as to how best we are able to fulfill God's unchanging and eternal word. And this is a viable, authentic program which is already working. We have been, it's been long in the making. We've been anticipating this day for a very, very long time, for many, many years. A lot of planning, a lot of intense research has gone into this. The program is even greater than we've described it. The program is not just raising a red heifer. Okay, you raised a red heifer, great. Raising the red heifer is like the tip of the iceberg, or the point of the spear, as it were, because the program is no less than a program of bringing this concept of tahara, of this elusive concept of this, what we're calling biblical purity, but which is really about spiritual balance and identity. That's what we're talking about bringing back into the world. This involves the Kohanim, the men of priestly descent from the tribe of Aaron. This involves many, many details, some of which are outlined in the stages that are described on the Indiegogo page. It's huge. It's the future. It's about the fulfillment of the Jewish people in our time now building the Holy Temple. It's absolutely staggering what it means. And I don't think that there's any coincidence. And I think that God, in His tremendous compassion, wisdom, and love, allowed us to come to this grand and momentous time this very week wherein we're able to see with our own eyes what it means, because look what we're up against. Look what happened this week. Look what's going on with Iran. And as we mark this passage of time deeper into the days of Av, when we will recall on the 9th of Av the destruction of the temple, we'll ask ourselves, what are we going to do about the destruction of the temple? We don't want to be sitting on the floor every year of our lives weeping and wailing. This is what we're going to do. We're going to act. We're going to see to it that we've done our best towards the building of the Holy Temple. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. Today, the 27th day of the month of Tammuz, 5775. It is the 14th day of July, 2015. As the rabbi pointed out earlier, this coming Thursday night, Friday, is Rosh Chodesh, the new month of Av, Menachem Av, the Consoling Father. Of course, we're in the midst of the 3 weeks of mourning for the loss of the Holy Temple, some 2,000 years ago, but of course we feel that loss each and every day anew, because every day without the Holy Temple is a day in which the world is really in the minus. Of course, the 3 weeks culminates on the 9th of Av, which is 1 week from this coming Sunday.
It's actually deferred. It falls on Shabbat, July 25th, but it is going to be observed. We don't fast generally on Shabbat unless it's Yom Kippur, and therefore the fast will be observed the next day on Sunday, the 26th.
This week's Torah portion is a double portion, concluding the reading of the book of Bamidbar, Numbers. It is Matot Mas'eh, and it opens up with the matter of vows. Very interesting, just as Israel is preparing itself to enter into the land at long last, the issue of vows, keeping your word, comes up, and the seriousness,
power of words, how
the power
words
of
could
words and
actually
the
change
seriousness
something.
of uttering words, and of course, that this occurs the same week that we're reading this the same week that the United States and Iran are signing their nuclear agreements. The idea of the power of words and of breaking of one's words, of one's campaign promises, twisting words, and in fact they can't even agree on what the wording of the agreement is, because each side to this agreement is busily promoting their own interpretation of it. I'd like to just skip over that for 1 second, Rabbi, because I know you want to talk about that more, and go on to the next issue that's presented in this week's Torah reading, and that is the command from God to avenge the Midianites for what they did. And of course what they did was they used the the Midianite women to entice the Israelites and to ultimately entice the Israelites into idol worship, which is despicable in God's eyes, and that itself led to a plague. And of course we talked about that last week. I don't want to go over that, but that incident of the seduction of the Israelite men by the Midianite women was the result of parting words given by Balaam, the heathen prophet, to Balak, who had hired him to curse Israel. And after his curses all failed and in fact turned into blessings, because that's what God wanted to happen, he gave this advice. And I can't help but see a parallel between Balaam and Balak and Barack Obama and Rouhani and the mullahs of Iran, who have been posturing for years and months now, to somehow cast a whammy on Israel. And Israel has stood tall and has not been a partner to this agreement, but in fact objects very vehemently. And now I can't help but feel that the parting words, as it were, is going to be a return to the, quote, peace process, in which the United States is going to say to Israel, now that we've guaranteed your safety and security by defanging Iran, which of course they did not do, now you have to move forward and give to your bitter enemies in order to placate me.
Now that we've guaranteed your security, please allow us to cut off your head.
Right. So that's what I want to say about that, Rabbi. I thought maybe you want
Well,
to
since
add
you
some
brought
more.
up the subject of the battle against Midian, I'd like to point out something which I think is extraordinary. Again, as you mentioned, this was Bilam's advice to Balak to use the Midianite girls to seduce Israel, to bring them to idolatry. And this was very, very upsetting to God. Here, God commands Moses in the beginning of chapter 31 of the book of Numbers, in this parsha of Matot. God spoke to Moses saying, "Take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterward you will be gathered to your people." So first of all, it's interesting that God came up with this idea and was so disturbed about what happened that God is telling Moshe, I want you to get revenge. I want you to take revenge on behalf of Israel for what they did to you. I mean, there are so many people who say that vengeance is not a biblical value or not a Jewish value, but here God initiated this action, this vengeful action, and told Moshe, I want you to take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. That's how serious it was what they did. And then he tells them, afterward, it's going to be time for you to die. And Moshe did not hesitate, even though he knew that this was basically the turning point in his career, because when he finished this exercise, he would be getting ready to die. In the next verse 3, we read, Moshe spoke to the people, saying, Arm men from among yourselves for the legion, that they may be against Midian, to inflict Hashem's vengeance against Midian. 1,000 from a tribe, 1,000 from a tribe. For all the tribes of Israel shall you send to the legion. And here we have to suddenly open our eyes and see something amazing just happened. I don't know if you caught it. There's a very big change in the wording. In verse 1 it says, God spoke to Moses saying, and verse 2 says, take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. But verse 3 says, arm men from among yourselves for the legion, that they may be against Midian, to inflict God's vengeance among Midian. So when God said to Moses, I want you to take vengeance, he said, take vengeance for the children of Israel. But when Moses spoke to the people, he said that they may inflict God's vengeance against Midian. So what is it? Is it the children of Israel's vengeance, or is it God's vengeance? And the answer is pretty clear and pretty straightforward, and that is, it's the same thing. Because whenever, throughout history, the children of Israel are attacked for their spiritual values, which is exactly what the attack of Midian was with the women. It was an attack against their spiritual values. Whenever that is done, it is basically an attack against the God of Israel and against his values, because that's what the people of Israel represent in this world. So to attack Israel is to attack the God of Israel. So that is pretty chilling to read the week that the deal with Iran was enacted and signed. Pretty chilling, the week of the beginning of the month of the destruction of the Holy Temple. But what's really, I think, even more poignant and striking about the way the verses work is that it's so intimate and it's such a telling testimony to our relationship with God, how he feels about an attack against Israel, that when Hashem said it to Moshe, when God said it to Moses, he's saying, take vengeance for the children of Israel. In other words, God is speaking like a father whose child was hurt, and he's saying to Moses, I want you to get revenge for my children. But when Moses said it over to the people, he said that they may inflict God's vengeance upon Midian, meaning Moses is telling to the people, we have to avenge our father. You see how each one is looking at it for the other, like with a heart for the other. Like God is saying, avenge my children, and Moses is saying, avenge God. But it's the same thing exactly. And that is pretty profound words to be reminded of. And of course, the ones that should be reminded of are the ones who enacted this whole deal. And again, just look at that. Opposite the concept of trying to renew purity in the world, trying to bring about a change in the cosmic balance of the recognition of God's presence in this world, which is exactly what we're up against. And I think it's just in this tremendous confluence of divine forces in the world that God gave us the privilege of being able to make this announcement and being able to begin this program the very same week, because it's pretty clear and stark to the eyes of anyone who wants to see it what these forces are in the world, and basically, honestly, to bring biblical purity into the world, paving the way to build the Holy Temple. That is the antidote to the satanic specter of the possibility of nuclear proliferation, Holocaust, especially in the hands of the very same country that is sponsoring the beheadings near you. That's what it is. There's the Islamic State, and there's the Islamic Republic, right? ISIS is called the Islamic State, and Iran is called the Islamic Republic of Iran. You know what? It's the same thing exactly.
Boy, don't tell that to them. They hate one another.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
So I just want to mention that the Parshiot are full of very amazing things. We also read in Parshat Matot about the tribes that wanted to stay on the other side of the Jordan because of because of the lush pasture available there for the flocks that they had, Reuven and Gad. And this also is an important concept for us to understand the centrality of the land of Israel in our lives, our attitudes as Jews all over the world about Israel, our priorities. What are our priorities? Are our priorities our own possessions, our own lifestyle, or honoring the God of Israel by coming into the land of Israel as per his command? there's a lot to say about this. And speaking of the other side of the Jordan, I think we have some to talk about that as well, because it's also something that we have to share, something burning on our hearts about. But I just want to say one more thing, Yitzhak. I know you want to talk more about some other things. The second parsha that we're going to be reading, Parshat Maseh, the concluding Torah portion of the book of Numbers, is all about the journeys of the children of Israel throughout the desert way stations. And it's a very, very amazing accounting. And it's maybe superficially a person could look at it and think, wow, this is just a lot of repetition of places. We knew they were in these places. Actually, the recording of the wanderings of the Jewish people throughout the desert is a very powerful spiritual key to understanding the life calling of every individual. These way stations, they're not just physical places. They're a process that every person has to go through from birth until the end of our lives, a process that we have to go through of development of spiritual identity and of striving to find out who we really are and where we're really going. And this is the tradition that's taught about these journeys, that we go through all the things that we have to go through in this painstaking divine orchestration in order to get to the places, both physical and spiritual, that we need to be. And we have to go through the things that we have to go through that makes us who we are in order to rise to the next level. So this theme of wandering and traveling and going from place to place, from stop to stop, before we come into the promised land, this is something that applies to every single individual. It's a very, very deep idea. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. You referred to a minute ago, Rabbi, something that we read in this past week's newspaper, Hebrew Press, which reveals a lot of details and otherwise unpublished information about the Netanyahu King Abdullah of Jordan agreement, which we have mentioned many times over the past year, as we have seen evidence. We've borne the evidence of this agreement, which has never been officially recognized by Israel, and actually will probably be vehemently denied. But in short, it has to do with the Temple Mount, and it has to do with Israel's conceding the ultimate authority, if not official recognized sovereignty, but the ultimate authority over the Temple Mount to Jordan. And this is the source of all our troubles concerning the Temple Mount. It's a source of the grave limitations on freedom of Jewish movement, physical movement, and spiritual presence on the Temple Mount. It's the source of the incitement against Jews in the Temple Mount, and it's the source of the Israel police's total inactivity, inaction toward
and by the way,
inciters.
today here in Jerusalem, there is a demonstration taking place at the foot of the Temple Mount by fellow Temple Mount activists and other individuals who are protesting the police discrimination against the Jewish people on the Temple Mount.
The police, in fact, tried to have they tried to ban the protest altogether, but the courts did give the protesters the right. They changed the hour and the location so as not to offend Muslim
sensibilities that might find out that we're even talking about this subject. And here's the thing. We've been saying for a very, very long time here on Temple Talk and through other channels as well, that the secret of what's going on the Temple Mount is some sort of very, very convoluted deal that's going on between the government of Israel, specifically Netanyahu, because the situation has gotten much, much worse under his tenure, between Netanyahu and the King of Jordan, that somehow just totally self-immolates our own interest on the Temple Mount and gives all authority to Jordan. We've testified to this fact over the years. We've brought many cases, much evidence, cited many examples of how it is clear, and it's been actually verified by various individuals in the government from time to time. It's been made clear that Jordan is setting the policy of the Temple Mount, and Israel is nothing more than a caretaker. That this beautiful expression that was made famous by the leader of the paratrooper brigade, Motogor, back in 1967, the Temple Mount is in our hands, Harabayit Bi'adenu, that it is not true, that Temple Mount is not in our hands, that we are not even considered to be unwelcome guests, that Jordan has been given sovereignty on the Temple Mount. This is what we've been saying for a long time, but in this past weekend's Hebrew paper, Makor Rishon, actually published a report, hitherto unpublished, somewhat secret report about Israel's relationship with Jordan and the triangle of Israel, Jordan, and the Temple Mount. And according to this report, it explained how Jordan's monarchy is basically dependent on their ability to be able to claim that they are in charge of the Temple Mount. In other words, Jordan's whole claim to any sort of legitimacy in the Arab world is to be able to be recognized as sovereign over the Temple Mount. And apparently, it's in Israel's twisted interest to keep Jordan stable. So Israel is bending over backwards to make Jordan happy and keep Jordan as satisfied as possible with the issue of the Temple Mount. And so the report went on to say that that Jordan needs to be in a position to be able to make sure that Israel understands that there can never be any Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount, that tourists would be welcome to return to the Temple Mount and to be able to enter into the Dome of the Rock as long as Jews cannot be afforded any time on the Temple Mount. The report singles out observant Jews, those recognizable as keeping their heads covered with kippot, that they should not be allowed on the Temple Mount. The report considers it very dangerous to Jordan that there is Jewish interest in the Temple Mount. And what makes us most proud, listeners of Temple Talk, what makes us the happiest is to be able to share with you that this report singles out the Temple Institute and explains that the Temple Institute is the most dangerous element in the delicate balance between the state of Israel and the fictitious kingdom of Jordan, and the balancing act of keeping Jordan happy about their fictitious sovereignty over the Temple Mount. The Temple Institute is the problem. You know why? Because the Temple Institute incites to violence? No, the report doesn't say that. Because the Temple Institute is radical or has plans to be in any sort of aggression on the Temple Mount? No. Why does the report single out the Temple Institute as being the single most dangerous factor in destabilizing Jordan's relationship with the Temple Mount? Because the report says the Temple Institute is educating the Jewish people and Jewish children about the importance of the Holy Temple and about their connection to the Temple Mount. And that, the report says, is the problem with the Temple Institute. We are dangerous because we are bringing the Jewish people back to these ideals and concepts, which of course is exactly what we want to do and what we are committed to doing. And we appreciate that vote of confidence that we have made such a difference to the Jewish people that we are now officially recognized as being the fly in the ointment of Jordan's control of the Temple Mount. So in this week of transition from Tammuz to the severe beginning of the month of Av and the destruction of the temple, and the time when the Jewish people will begin to intensify their level of mourning for the Holy Temple, and that will lead to the 9th of Av, when we all will be mourning for the temple and wondering, when will this ever end? And our attempts to end it by saying, let's bring a red heifer home, let's see to it that we're able to rebuild the temple, and then to be told by the kingdom of Jordan that we're in the way. Well, thank God we are not just sitting and mourning, but we are trying to do our best to restore the honor of the God of Israel, to fulfill his commandments, and to rebuild the temple in our own time.
So, if you are for the rebuilding of the temple, if you are for purity in the world, if you are against nuclear holocaust, if you're against Islamic fundamentalist jihadist terror,
If you want to stick it to Jordan,
if you want to stick it to Jordan, if you want to pray in the Temple Mount like a human being, well then, go to the Temple Institute's Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign entitled Raise a Red Heifer in the Land of Israel, Raise a Red Heifer in Israel, and join us. Be a part of it. Cast your lot with the future, with what's good in the world, with purity, with the Holy Temple, and set your face against all that's evil in the world, such as these evil, convoluted agreements between Western powers and Iran in order to basically enable Iran to continue in its path of destruction for the entire world. You have a choice. Red heifer or nuclear holocaust. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.